and pizza for the children?
Yeah.
Start.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for taking such good care of them. טוב, הבאתי למרתי קפה, ברברה הביאה למוגה.
מי?
ברברה. קוראים לה ברברה? זאת עם השיער עם המהגרים, סוזן. אז הביאה למוגה. עכשיו הם יוצאים לחצי מתי הסרט נגמר? יצטרך להבין או לא?
לא. אני מגיע אחרי הסרט. ואחרי הסרט, אחרי הדיון, הם הולכים לבית כנסת. שלפה.
כן.
זה הזמן להתארגנות.
אוקיי. בסדר. טוב.
אז בוא נלך לאכול גם פיצה.
כן.
לא? נעצור אותך סרט. סרט שיש?
כן.
ככה.
הוא כנראה אמר שהוא לא נשאר.
אמר לי, כן, אפשר. תודה, thank you for the dogs. Cake.
Bábovka.
Bábovka?
Bábovka.
Půjdeš za Půjdeš. Já ji tam, když tady doprovodím.
Jsou dvoje.
Já ti věřím, že mě palce ty to zvají. Jej, jdeme pryč. Já jsem zvyklá. Tak a už se nevrátíme, takže si to odspívejte sama. Tom kytaru, to je já. A co jsi Miloš?
כן. אני לא יודע כמה זמן היא במקהלה.
כן. האמת יצא יפה.
מאוד. נראה, אנחנו מתלהבים, נראה מה הבוס יגיד. קראו חם על הברוצי.
לא,
ברוצי. ברוץ'.
ברוץ'.
כן, תחלקי זה לשתיים. ברוץ'.
זה מה שכתבתי. ברוץ'. טוב, ואני...
זהו, מה שיש תהיי תצחקי. ואת לא עושה את הפרצופים האלה ואת לא עושה ככה מרגע לרומה.
למה אני ילדה מפגרת? לכתוב טנטרום של בת שנתיים.
bylo vyvarování tady? To jsem malou rozsypala.
Já jsem šla tady na tady.
Fakt? Já vidím to maličký.
Oh, I just need one seat, one person's there. Thank you. Děkuji.
Ale tady taky dvě sedačky, já budu tady tady.
Všichni budou chodit všichni.
Protože se tady zvedneš, tak budeš na té kameře.
Jo, všichni vidějí tvoje dvojí plošiny.
No tak běž na druhou. Tak běž na druhou.
Hello.
Počkej, pojď se podívat, tady je to popsaný.
Tohle na věci, ne?
Jo, počkej, se vrátíme. To jsou ty... No. Dobrý den.
People get their seats.
You have your choice.
I know, I don't know where to sit. Oh, it's so cold outside. I got like the hours yesterday.
Tak půjdeš dál?
So nice and warm. Yeah, cozy.
A já budu tady.
No snow, eh? So she's never safe. You have the big boots on. Weird.
Very nice. Different color seats.
You were here last night, no?
No.
Oh, that's right. Oh, this is, last night this was almost all full. And there were very few seats that I went up close. I know, I'm
Hi, Neil. How's it going?
It's going. Well, I'm sorry, I forgot to put the well on the end. It's going well.
Yes, he is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I really am. It's nice.
No, it's fine. This is fine.
Either because I didn't want to research on
Yeah.
things to use or stuff like that, but I didn't do any research on restaurants and stuff like that because I figured we'll do that when we're there, we can do ratings and whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm here, here. Hi, Dal. How are you?
Yeah.
Good. I'm gonna sit here. I'm gonna sit here.
Oh, yes, yes.
I'll save one. Oh, would you like to sit here? I'll put my brother down there. Just
No, okay. It's got.
whatever you like.
I can't do the
That's
stairs.
a nice. Yeah.
Or
no.
do you want to do? We can do the
Nope,
second one,
nope,
Malcolm.
do
Or
right there.
You sure? Okay.
Watch your seat.
Wednesday, which is like the majority.
Right,
of the
okay.
day, and it goes big one.
Hey,
And then
call it a,
yeah,
call it
yeah,
a,
it's got like
a seat, like,
like a love seat.
yeah, that's it. I love seat.
Love
Yeah.
seat.
Right, okay.
You gotta see for your camera. Your camera can have its own seat.
Again.
She saved all of that.
I just also wanted to put Michael, I don't know whether you are in the, I was also involved in writing the request for grant and all the instructions, you know, was to record and not provide education.
You're fine. You don't have to get up. I'm just gonna go to the restroom.
Over here and green center. Waiting for the demonstration.
Hey, June.
Ani na to normálně.
Anna. And what do I say? Is Sam? Sam? Say, Zay. My family, my rodina.
Okay. Magazines, but I don't know. It's quite late. I don't know whether you want to take all of them to Prague or just some.
Noticed you've got double. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I had my cousin bring it. This is a show I had in 2018. This is my cousin Igor. This is Dale.
Nice to meet you.
He's the filmmaker.
Filmmaker from New York.
No, Minnesota. Minnesota. He takes good care of me.
He's very lucky.
I'm very lucky that I have a beautiful family. Let me see where that is. Anishka. There's Anishka.
Já jste s námi jste na vlak, jo?
Opravdu, to jste hrdinka.
Autem, jo?
No, jako nevím, ano, neznám se s ní, ale
Jo, takže jak chcete, protože já můžu vůbec poznat na vládě, že... No, potřebujeme...
52, it's all like...
To je 6 hodin.
See if that can buy me. I think I'm gonna get coffee.
Tak jo, jo. Jasně, jasně, jasně.
A já potom na vteřinku se vrátím sem, protože jsem tady potkala kamarádku, která evidentně pracuje proti Vy pracujete Takže bych si s ní jenom řekla pár slov, takže Ondra ten bude asi nejbezpečnější. No.
Okay, last time I'll say goodbye. I said last time I'll say goodbye. Here, this is for you. I can put it in my book bag if you want. But Pablo gave it for all the Americans. It's local honey and this little stone people are painting outside. But it's honey from a local farmer. Yeah, lovely. No, I can put yours in my backpack.
Okay, just a second.
Ty vůbec nevíš, kde jsem.
Ty jsi ty.
To jsem já. 50. Had a 50 coin. No sport calls, I can't say. Beer was cheaper than cappuccino.
Co to je hezký, že se zabývají.
Oh, yeah.
No, když my máme potíž studie v zahraničí a zrovna je v Čechách, tak jsme jenom, chtěla jsem to původně být celý 2 dny, ale teď jsme to vzali jenom na tenhle ten film a co si vyjde. Jsem říkal, nevidí, neslíknu.
Takže říkám, to je neznámá.
Doufám, že se máš hezky.
Jo,
jsme teď měli různý
Dobrý večer, dobré odpoledne, vážení hosté. Kdo jste tu byl včera, tak jste viděl, že tu máme kufor, s kterým pan Leopold Pachtner vyšel do Terezína, s kterým se vrátil, pan Pachtner zpracovat. A nám přibývají předměty, ale ubývají nám diváci. Tak doufám, že večer ještě tady bude někdo, ale ten předmět, který nám teď přibyl, je velice speciální, velice důležitý. My o tom budeme mluvit ještě později, ale jedná se o původní pacovskou tóru, svazek starého zákona, který se používal v židovských synagogách. Do dneška se používá v židovských synagogách. A tenhle ten svazek je odsud z Pacova a je vlastně tu poprvé od roku 1941, kdy se zapřela pacovská synagoga, stejně jako ostatní synagogy v Čechách a na Moravě. A ty tóry potom se dostaly do Prahy, tam byly uloženy. A v 60. letech potom byly odprodány tehdejší vládou do Velké Británie. A ty tóry se dneska darují vlastně židovským kongregacím na světě, které ještě jsou živé židovské kongregace. Tahle ta tóra pochází z Anglie, z Milton Keynes, z města asi 100 km od Londýna. A ten film, který za chvíli uvidíte, je o dalších 5 pacovských tórách, které jsou ve Spojených státech. Takže přátelé ze Spojených států bohužel nemohli přijet tak dlouhou cestu, nicméně uvidíme aspoň to zprostředkovaně na tom filmu. Takže vám chci popřát příjemný zážitek, ten film bude končit, máme asi tak 40 minut a potom budeme mít krátkou představení té tóry a pokud někdo budete mít zájem, tak poprvé uděláme takový malý průvod, půjdeme s tou tórou tady odsud z komunitního centra do synagogy, pacovské synagogy, kde bude krátký 10-15 minut obřad v poctě té tóry a vlastně v poctě té židovské komunity, která tady žila až do roku 1942 a s ní většina zahyнула během holokaustu. So, I will now, I just wanted to say, so I will pass floor to Karen. I just wanted to say for the logistics, so once we finish here, well, all who want, so we have dinner together in the restaurant on the main square. So it's already arranged. We can all go there together and then we come back here for the concert at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Thank you. I will not translate that because it's above my ability, even though my Czech teacher's in the back there telling me I need to speak more Czech. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, this film was something I had an epiphany about when it was spoken between Pavel, Michal, and myself about having an event to commemorate or remember the 80th anniversary of the transport of the Jews of Potsdam in this area to Tabor and then on to Terezin and other death camps. And I thought, what a lovely opportunity for all the Torah scrolls from Potsdam, there's 7 of them, to come back here for a reunion. There's no Jewish community here, so no reason to have the scrolls in the synagogue at this point. But we might think so after we finish it, Jeffrey. So we have one of our Torah scrolls that was returned from South Africa that is at the Memorial Scrolls Trust in London. We have the congregation from Milton Keynes outside of London and the UK who generously brought their scroll. This scroll belonged to the synagogue here in Potsdam. We have 5 congregations in the United States. And in this film, I have to introduce in the back here and come up here, is Dale Bluestein, who I was introduced to a few years ago through someone that works through the Memorial Trust, Susie Boyer Fisher, who lives in Los Angeles, near me. I'm from Los Angeles. And she introduced me to Dale because I had this epiphany that all the scrolls would come back here for this event. But when I've been in touch with 4 of the 5 American, and I've been in touch with Priscilla at Milton Keynes since 2014, and I wrote to all the congregations and I said, please come in November of 2022 to Potsdam for this event. And all of them, because of COVID and financial things, they said, oh, we'd love to, but we can't. So I thought, I'm going to bring them all here in a film. And so I called Dale and we spoke about it, and finally it came true. I want to thank Helena Wagnerova, who is here from the American Embassy in Prague, because without your support, this film wouldn't happen. Also, the University of Southern California, where I am a retired professor from, I want to thank them too, because they also donated money for this film. And I hope you enjoy the film. My connection to Potsdam is that my great-great-grandfather, Moses Koblitz, married his second wife. His first wife, Rosalia, passed away in childbirth in 1859. So in 1860, Moses married Johanna Meller of Potsdam in this synagogue here in Potsdam. And I have been coming here, I've been interested in my family history. My family dates back to 1756 in a town called Brodachov, which is maybe 8 kilometers from here. And I have 2 family here, Vladka and Libor Koblitz. We are related because my family lived on their ancestors' farm and were peddlers. Moses Koblitz was a peddler of farm goods. And so Daniela and Marie have always been so supportive here. Peter Dufek, who's the archaeologist I'm noticing in the audience, and Julius Mueller, who's not here. He was the person that took me on the journey to find my family here in the Czech Republic. So without any further ado, I hope you enjoy the film. We've watched it many times. Pavel helped me so much on this film. And I hope you enjoy the film.
There is a legend that when the Temple of Solomon was destroyed in Jerusalem, stones were taken by angels and used in the old new synagogue in Prague, with the promise that when the temple in Jerusalem is restored, the stones would be returned. Stones, from which we have built our synagogues for 2,000 years, are often the last traces of what once was, standing in defiance against the elements, against fire, against change, against time. Far from the Jewish quarter in Prague, in the many smaller communities that dot the landscape, there has been Jewish worship, most in small, modest gatherings, homes, or prayer rooms. But in some communities, overcoming resistance, oppressive laws, and untold obstacles, a synagogue was built. In Patzov, about 100 kilometers southeast of Prague, one such building remains. Though voices reading the sacred Torah scrolls are no longer heard there, couples are not wed, babies are not named, nor holidays celebrated, the walls still stand. Light pours through windows, windows that have endured the darkest times that Jews have seen, times where no light could be found. But the hope and memory and devotion to those who once lived their lives in the warmth of this light is where our mission begins. This once holy space, its community gone, became a place forgotten. It endured time, rain, decay, and neglect, but it has survived. And now it is poised to be reborn, a bridge to the past and a message for the future. The first Jews arrived in Patzov in the mid-16th century. The regions of Moravia and Bohemia became part of the Habsburg Empire, which expelled Jews from Prague, sending them to smaller cities and towns. For the next 300 years, the ruling dynasties, laws, economic opportunities, and status all seemed to be a constant changing burden for each generation of Jews living there. Throughout this period, while continuing these restrictions, Jewish life endured and continued to develop, even thrive, in the city of Prague. Smaller communities also grew, as many Jews sought refuge away from the larger cities and the centers of power where the threats to their safety were greater. By the mid-1700s, there were nearly 600 small villages in Moravia and Bohemia, with 2/3 of Jews living outside of Prague. In 1781, there began the slow, uneven, but eventual societal change for Jews. It was the beginning of the emancipation. Strict oppressive laws began to ease, and Jews began to gain rights that other nationalities held. Finally, in 1867, Jews received legal equality. The gradual migration back to the larger cities began. But some of the smaller towns and cities maintained their relatively sizable Jewish population. The city of Patzov reached its highest Jewish population of just over 200 people in 1880. The exact population and arrival dates in a town or region are often hard to know. Records are vague, often incomplete, or simply lost to time. But there is one date that remains indisputable. The date in which Jewish life in Patzov came to an end. November 13th, 1942. The transport of nearly 100 people occurred as Jews were ordered to gather at a local school. From there, they were sent to the larger city of Tabor. 3 days later, they would be on a train transport, where they would arrive at the town of Bohushevice nad Ohry, where they would be forced to walk the final 2 miles from the train station, carrying their belongings, to a garrison encampment, Terezin, in German, Theresienstadt. Nearly 100 souls, 31 family names. Most of these family histories remain lost, but thankfully, there are stories to have emerged from the ashes. Families in which the threads of memory continue. In Patzov, one of these memories can be found in the story of the Lederer family. Father Emil Lederer was a prominent community leader. His daughter, Viera, along with the other Jewish residents of Patzov, was sent to Terezin. She was scheduled to transfer to Auschwitz with her mother and sister, but a family acquaintance removed her name from the transfer list, thus saving her life. Her mother and sister perished. Viera ultimately was sent to Auschwitz. After a period of time at a forced labor camp, she was sent with thousands of others on a death march to Bergen-Belsen. She and 2 other girls escaped the march and survived. Viera was the only member of her family to survive, and, as miraculously, their family photo album survived, proof of the lives that were lived. Nelly Presma, née Gutmanova, survived Auschwitz and lived in Prague for a short time after the war, and then emigrated to Israel. Nelly returned to Patzov in 2017 to retrace the steps of her youth as the daughter of Patzov's last rabbi. She was able to walk through the house that she once called home, a structure that is now also part of the effort to preserve their history. Hanush Bader was on the transport that left Patzov in 1942, and one of the few who survived. He too went on to Auschwitz and Schwarzheide labor camp, and was deported to the Bergen-Belsen near the end of the war. On the brink of death, the British liberated Bergen-Belsen, and Hanush survived. Yaroslav Lustig was also the only survivor of his family. His wife, son, and entire extended family would die in Auschwitz. His horrific journey took him through a series of labor camps and brought him within hours of death, but he was saved just in time by Russian and Polish liberators. He returned to Patzov after the war and lived until 1987. Hugo Jokl studied at the University of Vienna in the early 1920s. He would go on to become a teacher of languages and history. Hugo worked at the Hagibor labor camp in Prague from October 1944 and was sent on to Terezin near the war's end. When Hugo died in 1960, per his wishes, he was buried in the Patzov Jewish cemetery along with his family. Leopold Pachner was also on the November transport of 1942. He survived Auschwitz and returned to spend time in a small home outside of Patzov in the years after the war. Leopold was perhaps one of the few survivors to maintain a connection to Patzov after the war. His granddaughter, Zuzana, recalled that a simple walk across the town square would take over an hour because so many of Leopold's friends would stop him to talk. Leopold lived another 20 years, and when he died, he would be the last burial in the Jewish cemetery in Patzov. Few other remnants of Jewish life remain in Patzov, a community that had existed for nearly 500 years. The time and weather-worn stones in the Patzov Jewish cemetery give witness to where life seems to have ended. But there yet remains a bond, a living link to the Jews of Patzov. They take the form of sacred Torah scrolls, Torahs that were carried, read from, and lifted up within the very stone walls of the synagogue by the Jews of Patzov and the other surrounding communities. The story of these scrolls is one of resilience and survival. The nightmare of Nazi occupation took hold after the Munich Agreement in 1938, and practically overnight, Jewish communities were forced from the Sudetenland, the German name for the regions on the western, northern, and southern border of Moravia and Bohemia. By March 15th of 1939, the Nazis would complete their occupation, and the country of Czechoslovakia would cease to exist, replaced by what would be called the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, sealing the fate of the synagogues and their contents from around the country. For many years after the war, it was believed that the Nazis had planned to establish a museum to an extinct race, though over time, researchers have found no direct evidence of this plan, and now consider this idea to be a myth. While it is known that some Nazis held a fascination with and desire to collect Jewish religious items and books that they thought would be of value, it is believed that it was the members of the Jewish community that persuaded Hans Gunther, the SS Sturmbannführer, to allow a dispatch to be sent calling for all Jewish communities' possessions to be shipped to the Jewish Museum in Prague for collection. Items came from over 150 towns from Moravia and Bohemia. The Jewish Museum librarians and curators were given the almost inconceivable task of cataloging this vast treasure, the Judaica of the entire Jewish population of what was Czechoslovakia. Spread over 40 buildings throughout Prague, miraculously, over 200,000 items, including over 1,500 Torah scrolls, survived. Their desperate work continued as the war raged on, hoping that their work would not only save their precious history, but also keep them off the transports. One by one, their names were called for deportation. By October of 1944, all were gone. Sent initially to Terezin, their horrific journey ended in Auschwitz and other death camps. In 1945, in the war's aftermath, some 50 communities attempted to re-establish Jewish life. But following the communist coup in 1948, Jewish worship, as well as other religious practice, was largely restricted and closely monitored. While the Jewish Museum in Prague remained open, the Torah scrolls were moved in 1958 to the abandoned Michle Synagogue in the outskirts of Prague. In the early 1960s, an American art dealer living in London was made aware of the scrolls as the communist government was looking to sell them. When brought to the basement of the Michle Synagogue and shown hundreds and hundreds of scrolls stacked floor to ceiling, he brought it to the attention of one of his clients in London, Ralph Yablon. Yablon conferred with Rabbi Harold Reinhardt of the Westminster Synagogue and agreed to finance the purchase. A deal with the communist government was reached, and in February of 1964, arriving at the door of the Westminster Synagogue were 1,564 Torah scrolls. Some tattered, some burned, some with hidden notes of despair and pleas for help, some stained with blood. In the years that followed their arrival in London, Potsdam scrolls were sent to synagogues just north of London, across the ocean, and across America. A link to a Jewish community that was gone, now connected to communities that will remember.
And the one thing that I wanted for this very new congregation was a very old Holocaust Torah. And I said something about that, and it turned out that the man sitting next to me knew Rabbi Friedlander and arranged for him to bring the Holocaust Torah here. About 6 months later, he showed up. And it was an incredible moment for all of us. We had done a dedication of the property and all of this, but in many ways, the emotional dedication was that night. And that the drama of having that Torah that was a remnant of a vital Jewish community. Rabbi Friedlander had carried the Torah over, wrapped in brown paper on his lap. At the point in the service when it was time, we opened the Torah scroll. And it's a very emotional thing. I mean, it was a remnant of a community, and I was so aware of that. And when we took off the paper, it was this beautiful Torah, and it was tied with a simple piece of string and a square knot. And the scribe had trimmed the ends of this. It was just perfectly neat. And it just took my breath away. Still does. I mean, I was really frozen. It was, and that was, that was the dedication of the temple in the most significant way, because we knew we had a future. And now we were rooted in a way that we had never been.
I found my mom's travel diary. She was a prolific writer. And I found a notation from December 19th, 1978, in which she indicated that she and my dad and my brother Paul went to the Westminster Synagogue in order to pick up the Holocaust Torah for the Fairlawn Jewish Center. I remember my brother carrying the Torah through the airport and onto the plane. And my brother said he felt very proud carrying the Torah.
In 2014, or about a year before 2014, a letter was sent to all the synagogues that had the scrolls. They're going to have a major celebration in London of the 50th anniversary, and we want every congregation who has one, make a poster. And on the poster, you can have pictures of people and pictures of your scroll, and we'll put the posters up in London, and we'll have this tremendous celebration. And I said to myself, wow, that's great. Let's do that. Let's be part of it. And I thought at the time that our scroll came from a city called Pakov, P-A-C-O-V, and that's how I pronounced it. So I said, maybe, just maybe, there's something about that city somewhere. So I started doing some research on the internet, and also one of the religious school classes, the 7th graders, were doing a unit on the Holocaust, and they were helping us. So I typed in P-A-C-O-V, and I was astonished how much there was. The Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. had movies, home movies of Jews who were from Patsov taken in the 1930s. It was astonishing. Then it's services and said, I have this article, it's about 6-7 pages long, it's in Czech. I don't know anybody who knows Czech, maybe somebody might help me. Remember, the congregation comes forward and says, I know someone who knows Czech. She hand wrote out a translation. So that was one stage. Then one day, after services, I see 2 people standing by the Torah. The woman said, I'm a doctor, and my mother was from the Czech Republic, was sent to a camp and survived the death march at the end of the war. And so I was able to translate the 8 or 9 page article, The Histories of the Jews of Patzov. It was a small community, at most a couple of hundred. But they built a synagogue. They had services there. They thrived. They did very well with their neighbors for the most part. It's an aspect of Jewish history, and then the Nazis murdered them and destroyed it. They deserve to be remembered. And I only wish we had more sources that we could speak about and recall who they were, what their lives were like. Otherwise, the lives of the people would just be totally lost.
Whether read from the Bima or in the light of a memorial display, each scroll brings powerful messages to its congregation.
Number one, they said a picture is worth 1,000 words. And the reality is that anybody who walk in this place, the largest crowd, like in every congregation, is the Yomim Tovim, is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. You walk in, you right away recognize the Torah scroll. When you have a break, when you have an event, you have other life cycle events, you see it. As a teacher in our school, I always make the business from time to time to take the children and show them the two locations of the Torah scrolls that are given to us, because we have some of our congregants who either survivors or children of survivors. The subject of the Shoah comes up relatively often, and from time to time we incorporate the story of the very emotional and special Sifrei Torah that was given to us.
In the Talmud, there is a phrase, Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Lezeh. All of the people of Israel are responsible for one another. And this Torah is one of the ways that we hold on to that responsibility. We hold on to the responsibility of telling the story of a community people might not know about, and remembering that the Holocaust isn't just about what happened in concentration camps, but it also happened in homes and in villages that were beloved to people for many years. And so we take that responsibility incredibly seriously when we provide our safe home to this Torah today.
When I first came into this sanctuary 2 years ago, I saw the quote that is on the plaque above our display case, Halo Zeh Ud Mutzal Me'esh. And I wasn't familiar with the verse. Hello, behold, Zeh, this, Ud, and I had not remembered the meaning of that word. Mutzal, saved, Me'esh, from the fire. And here we have the translation, saved from the midst of the fire. And I went to a biblical dictionary and I looked up, the word Ud means ember. It means a stick for a fire. And I had chills when I read this, right? That this Sefer Torah, this Torah scroll, could have been kindling for an actual fire. And it wasn't. This is a quote from the 3rd chapter, verse 2 of the book of Zechariah. And we read this in the Haftarah, in the selection from the books of the prophets, on the Shabbat of Hanukkah, on the Shabbat of rededication of the temple. Behold, this was saved from being a twig in the fire. And isn't that the representation of everything we are doing here as a community in the world after the Shoah?
Oh, it does.
Over the years, that people have referred to the fact that we've got this special Patzov scroll. I knew about them from a very young age because my father actually was on an academic conference in the Czechoslovakia, and so I knew about the Czech scrolls from when I was a child. So I was fascinated when I came to Milton Keynes to hear about them.
Yeah.
And actually see one in person.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
It's an honour to have this scroll. It represents a community who have perished, and every time we look at it, we can think of all those people who died.
You're immediately reminded that there was a sort of other life
that was taken away by the Nazis. It was such a different community and a different life to what we have now, and I think that's what it reminds me of.
We know the names of these people, and it just brings it home. They're like part of our community. They're our ancestors, and we can say Kaddish for them, and we can mourn their death because their relatives aren't around to do it.
This scroll is them being us.
The scrolls still live in Jewish communities, and Jewish communities still thrive.
And Patzov lives on here.
Patzov is located in an area which is somewhere from where my family comes. And this is also somewhere where we spent, as kids, as children, we spent summers. We went there to spend the summer holidays and so. And I have also a lot of relatives in the area. Kind of as kids, we would be listening to them. What they remembered and their stories from the past. And then in 2015, I had my aunt, my great aunt, who suddenly started talking about the classmates she had before the war, the Jewish classmates who went to the same school. And so she was starting mentioning some names. And so I became curious, so I started to do a little research about this one girl that she remembered very much, and she was always talking about her. That I couldn't find her, and then finally, I after doing some research, I did find, and she perished in Holocaust. She was killed in what's today Belarus after spending only like 2 weeks in Terezin, and so was her whole family. So I was always thinking about this this aunt of mine who had a very long life, happy life, and so. And I was thinking about this girl who was killed when she was 16 in 42 in Belarus. And so I mentioned it to someone in Patzov, which is close to where we have the country cottage. And they said, yes, of course. I mean, there were also many Jews in Patzov, and there even is an old synagogue. And so I was really shocked to also hear that this town of Patzov, which I thought I knew, very well, actually. I had the secret that, I didn't know about at all.
It began with a woman's memory of being a young girl whose friend one day disappeared and was never seen again. Sometimes this is all that it takes. So go the efforts of Tikkun Patzov, an organization established to purchase and save this remarkable space by securing the structure, replacing the roof, and ensuring the Patzov synagogue was placed on the heritage list of the Czech Republic in 2020. The much bigger task of restoring the building is an effort that continues, all in the memory of the people who once worshipped here. Not only will their lives be celebrated, but ideas will be shared, art will be experienced, and a message of love and tolerance and hope will now radiate from these windows.
And the idea of Mechayei Meitim, right? Of the concept from our tradition of resurrecting that which is dead, whether literally or metaphorically, in memory of those in Patzov and the other communities in that area, certainly in their memory, as well as the idea of we have been blessed to live on. It's when we observe Yom HaShoah, it's Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura. We came through it, the triumph eventually on the other side.
There were people who held that Torah. There were people who read from that Torah. They held that at one time. And now, and what they went through, and those who saved these Torahs, what they went through to save them. But you have to show people, these people, the faces of these people, faces of the Czechoslovakian people who were involved with saving these Torahs, who went through so much because they were Jew and never gave up their Jewishness.
Our religion is life, if it's anything at all. But at some juncture, these things have to be remembered. How you do it is, you know, is up to each generation, but it has to be done.
Discoveries are occurring every day, and the local community begins to feel a sense of renewed interest.
Pro mě osobně je to takový kontakt s vlastní minulostí, protože můj praděda byl městským úředníkem a dříve pracoval v advokátní kanceláři mocenského žida pana Wardheimera a mně se zachovaly taky vlastně drobné dokumenty této činnosti a je to takový prostup i rodinný a na závěru tomu vlastně vzhledem té tragédii té první poloviny 20. století se naše společnost Archea Brna rozhodla udělat tento výzkum zdarma.
That the community of Patzov, their Torah, supports our Torah. Incredibly special to have this Torah here. I think we're very fortunate, the only synagogue in Northern California that has a Czech Torah from Patzov. I think it's quite meaningful.
Think of the effort that that group of just a couple of hundred people put into to build that synagogue, to maintain that Jewish community, and it was then gone. We owe the past a way of remembering them, and again, especially today, we owe the present and the future the memory of those Jews and those communities. We have the opportunity to prevent that from happening for the Jews of Patzov.
It has been a significant part of the life of our congregation and our understanding of ourselves and our obligations to bring life to the words of that Torah that come to us from a community that was destroyed.
So when I think of the Torah from Patzov, I really think about how grateful I am that this Torah is still alive in many ways and that we are still alive, and we sing Am Yisrael Chai, and this Torah is living proof.
When a community remembers and celebrates its past, it is destined for a positive future. There are many faces, many families, many stories, and many journeys interwoven in this space. The ties that now connect this small community to communities around the world are many. And if followed, each thread returns to this sacred space.
Short credits.
Sorry about the hiccup, but nothing is perfect, but.
And we thank all the people that were at the end of that were
So Priscilla, do you want to come and do the honor?
Before we walk, I have candles for everyone to carry, but I didn't get anything underneath them, so hold them at an angle so they don't burn you. So I'm going to go out there and have candles ready as we follow you in a procession.
My teď půjdeme, vezmeme tu tóru, budeme mít svíčku v ruce, ale nemáme to v tom nic, tak pokud bude zapálené, tak pak myslím. A teď půjdeme odtud do synagogy, kde bude, jak říkám, 15 minut, tak